What's up, everyone? Today we're doing some replay of some Commander I played on MTGO with Gishath Son's avatar. If you like this video, make sure you let me know. And we're playing on MTGO, so it's kind of different than I know a lot of videos you're used to. And we're trying out Gishath. I did a CEDH video on this. Well, not really. I sort of accidentally joined the CEDH pod, and it was weird, but this is a casual pod, so it's going to go more like I'm used to. Our opening hand seems pretty decent. We have a ramp spell, we have interaction, we have a tutor. I wish we had a 2-mana ramp spell, but Topiary Stomper is one of the better cards in our deck. And let's get started. So we have 3 opponents as usual. Our first opponent is playing Finn the Fangbearer. So this has Death Touch, and whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So this is a fairly good commander with a lot of small Death Touch creatures, and then they do combat damage, and your opponent gets poison counters. You know, in Commander, people start with 40 life, but if you have 10 poison counters, you lose, so it's a way to get around that. You only have to attack with, or get in 5 times with Death Touch creatures, and since your deck is full of Death Touch creatures, there's certain things you can do to kill your opponent's big creatures, or dissuade your opponents from attacking. It's a pretty cool deck. I like it. I know a lot of people don't like it because of poison, but I think it's kind of cool. Our second opponent is playing Grim Corpseborn. So it says it enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap. However, you can sacrifice another creature to untap it and put a counter on it. So if you're playing an Aristocrats deck, sacrifice your creatures that you want to die. You get to untap it and build this guy. And then when it attacks, you destroy target creature defending player controls and put a 1/1 counter on it. So when you attack, you're just blowing up your opponent's best creatures, which is fairly strong, actually. The downside is that it doesn't untap unless you have creatures to sacrifice. And our last opponent is playing Galadriel. I think that's how you pronounce it. Light of Valinor 2 and a Bant. I did not know this guy existed, but whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you choose one that hasn't been chosen. You could add 3 green mana, which is fairly strong. You get scry 2 and draw a card, or you can put a counter on each creature you control. So this is a go wide deck that plays lots of tokens, lots of small creatures, and then you put counters on all of them. You can abuse those counters with certain abilities and stuff. So pretty strong decks, interesting decks, and we are playing Gishath, of course. Let's get to the actual gameplay. So our first opponent plays this interesting card, Minamo, and a Wayfarer's Bauble. So Minamo will allow them to actually untap the Grim. And then our second opponent just plays a land. And then we just play a Jetmir's Garden. And we're not really going to go too much into detail about what happens in the early game. We draw Ripjaw Raptor. That's a fairly strong card, but we just play a Jetmir's Garden, get our tap lands out of the way, and our opponent plays a Forest, and they tap out. Second opponent cracks their Wayfarer's Bauble. Wayfarer's Bauble is a pretty strong card. I like it. It allows you to ramp in the early game, get you 3 mana. If you have this on turn 1, it's fairly strong. It's ramp for decks that don't necessarily have ramp, so if you're playing a non-green deck, it's going to be fairly strong for you. Our last opponent is going to be stuck on lands, actually, which is kind of sad for them, but they won't be stuck on lands for too long. We are going to play a Mosswort Bridge, and then hide away a Watley. So Mosswort Bridge, whenever we have power 10 or greater, we can cast this Watley for free. And then there's a Finn the Fangbearer. So that's that Death Touch creature. So when it deals combat damage, they get 2 poison counters, but this also turns on all of his other Death Touch creatures. And then there's an Arcane Signet from my Grim opponent. And so they're doing a little ramping as well. Actually, they ramped more than anyone else because they had a Wayfarer's Bauble and an Arcane Signet. And then our next opponent is going to play a Fintorn Elves and an Avacyn's Pilgrim. So these work really well with his commander because whenever the creatures come in, he gets the abilities, and then also it's going to ramp you. Like, that's really good. And then, of course, we're going to play our ramp dinosaur, Topiary Stomper. I like this card because it's a dinosaur, so It works well for Tribe, but also late in the game, if we have 7 or more lands, it becomes a 4/4, which is not the worst. It's not insanely good, but a 4/4 can still deal some combat damage. And then we have this Galta setting up. If we could play this Ripjaw Raptor, we can get this Watley, and then maybe cast this Galta. Our next opponent, Telmagi, our Pinhorn opponent's going to play a Death Touch Mana Dork, so this is good for his deck, but also has Death Touch, so, it's going to deal the poison counters, and he's going to attack with Finn on the open opponent to put 2 poison counters there. That's a pretty quick clock, because you get 10 poison counters, you die. And then our Grim opponent's going to play Scarab God. Probably the best creature in play right now. Definitely is the best creature in play. Our tokens for go wide opponent, Galadriel, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, is going to go ahead and play something else, a 3 visits to ramp. And then is going to play a Lightning Greaves attached to his Avacyn's Pilgrim. That's ultimately to protect his commander. And then we are going to play Ripjaw Raptor and then hold up either a Path to Exile or Wordly Tutor. We could Path the Scarab God if it ever becomes too problematic, because he can recover things from the graveyard for it, or we can Wordly Tutor for something. We could Wordly Tutor for, oddly enough, the dinosaur that comes in and deals 1 damage to every creature. I think that'd be a little too mean, though, but it could be good. Our Death Touch opponent's going to play Bow of Nylea, giving attacking creatures Death Touch, so that means he doesn't even have to play Death Touch creatures. You can just play normal creatures and give him Death Touch, and then it also has other abilities as well. And then he's going to deal some combat damage, and we are going to sit back. We're not taking any combat damage. No one's worried about us, really. He's going to deal 4 poison counters to our go wide opponent, Galadriel opponent there. And then next, you can play Grim and then untap the Grim with the Minamo. So that way he doesn't have to sacrifice a creature to untap it. And now he has this creature that can just attack and just destroy things, which is kind of crazy because we have some pretty big creatures that we don't want to be destroyed. He chooses not to attack. And then our Galadriel opponent is going to cast their commander. So this way, whenever they play more creatures, they can get triggers off of their commander. And they can, draw cards, put counters on all their creatures, and add some mana. And they're going to go ahead and equip their Lightning Greaves to their commander. And then I don't know if this was the right decision. In hindsight, we were looking for more cards. So we decide to Worldly Tutor, not for the Raging Swordtooth, which I think would have been the right answer, or the Bonehorde Dracosaur. We get the Earthshaker Dreadmaw to get a huge creature on board. We should have got the Itali Primal Conqueror, honestly. But I'm just like, we can draw 2 cards. I didn't want to make any enemies, and I just like Earthshaker Dreadmaw. It probably was the wrong decision, but we get the Earthshaker Dreadmaw, and then we go ahead and cast it to draw 2 cards. Probably the wrong decision, honestly. I'm just looking for lands. We do get a Goring Ceratops, which is going to be a really strong card later in the game. But right now, we have a Path to Exile, Otepec Huntmaster. We have a Galta. We're not really doing all that much right now, but we're setting up for some big stuff. Our next opponent, they have 5 cards in hand. Most of their deck is going to be small creatures, though. So, small creatures with Death Touch, right? And so I hope they don't attack me because I don't want to get poison counters, but I also don't want to have my big creatures die, if that makes any sense. Like, what's weird about this deck is playing against it. You're sitting there thinking, oh, well, they just have small Death Touch creatures. I don't want to block, but then you don't want to get poison counters because it's 1/5 for your life total. They play Toxic Scorpion. They tap these down. I would have just been attacking with these, honestly. I do like Finn though. Finn is a pretty cool commander. He attacks and it blocks the Avacens, so yeah, he's blocking. He's already got 4 infect, so he's blocking so he doesn't get more infect counters. But this is also interesting because yeah, it's just a 1/2 blocking a 1/1, but the 1/2 is much more of a threat than just the 1 power. And then there's a Whip of Erebos. Creatures have lifelink, and then you can resurrect creatures. He has a Scarab God, though. So Scarab God can obviously resurrect the creatures anyways. But Whip of Erebos does a pretty good job resurrecting. So if your creatures die to the Grim to untap it, you can just resurrect them with the Whip of Erebos or the Scarab God, so you can continue to sacrifice them. That's a pretty good synergy. He's getting back to the Absence Pilgrim, and it's a 4/4, and he's going to attack. The Grim is going to destroy something. He's not going to attack me, which I don't know why. I'm not really doing anything. He's going to attack our opponent plays Death Touch, destroy the Finn, so now his creatures aren't threats anymore. And get in for like 11 damage. It's not bad. He's gonna block with Death Touch. That's a good idea. If you have Death Touch blockers, you might as well block with them. And kill your opponent's things, right? It does weaken your own strategy, but you have a deck full of Death Touchers. He's gonna kill Scarab God and Grim. Scarab God dies. It returns it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next upkeep, or next instep. Which is pretty good because he's gonna literally get it like the next. He's gonna be able to replay it in the next turn. So blocking and killing it isn't really that much of a big deal. We have Path to Exile, which can kill it forever though. So our opponent playing the Galadriel, if they play some creatures, they can grow their team or they can add some mana. They can do both, right? Because you get to do one of them each turn. So he's going to go ahead and play. What did he actually play? Turn that. Plays Recruit the Worthy, which creates a 1/1. And then he buys it back so he can just continue to do it. And then from that, he adds 3 green mana, which he can use to cast Recruit the Worthy again. And then this time, he can use that to grow his team. Oh, he scries 2 and draws a card, and then he attacks. How did I put counters on my team? Huh. Everyone's going after this guy with the Death Touch creatures. I don't exactly know why. We go ahead and play Otepec Huntmaster. Gives our dinosaur spells cost 1 less to cast, and then also we can tap it to give it dinosaur haste. We go ahead and play Temple of Plenty. I like the temples because they scry, and we need this land. We're thinking about casting our big boy Gishath here soon. We have enough power on board that we can flip this Moss or Bridge over. Play this Watley. And then we can use this Watley to kill some creatures, or we can just create 3/3s, which I think right now I create 3/3s, although I could kill some of the 1/1s on board, but I'm not really too worried about that. And then right now I have a Path to Exile held up, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and an 8th mana on top. So I can play Gishath next turn. We attack our opponent for 6/6 because, you know, we might as well attack. Might as well get some damage in. And I think I attack. My opponent is playing the Death Touch creatures because everyone else is attacking him, and I'm just like, you know what? If everyone else is attacking him, I might as well attack him. I don't want to gain any enemies at this point in the game. I just want to do what everyone else is doing. We're just gonna attack the guy who's playing Death Touch creatures and Infect because people don't like that for some reason, even though I'm totally fine with the strategy. He's already at 22, by the way. And my T Baggins opponent playing the Grims at 50. He plays something to recur something. Not that important, but then he taps out a lot of mana, 6 mana. Castle Garenberg coming in handy, or no, he doesn't tap 6 mana. Damn. Sad. I was hoping to see something big from him so he can stay in the game. He plays the Tajiro Blade, which has Death Touch. It's just a 1-mana Death Touch guy. That's what he got back with that regrowth ability. I think he plays a Fen, so now they can put infect counters on people. Yeah, Finn is really critical to the strategy, and being a 2-mana commander is pretty easy to recast. However, it's going to get hated out pretty easily, and it doesn't do anything by itself. It needs other Death Touch creatures to really have its big effect. So it has some strengths and weaknesses to it. He only has one Death Touch creature that he doesn't attack with, and then he passes. Going to tap Avacyn's Pilgrim, and then play this guy. And then play a Scarab God. So you replay Scarab God and plays this guy, which allows him to copy things from the graveyard. And then our Galadriel opponent's gonna play Conclave Mentor, which means that when he puts counters on his creatures, he's gonna put that many counters +1/+1. He also plays Kadama of the West Tree, which gives his guys trample. That's pretty problematic, honestly, because now he has tramplers. But we have a Path to Exile to stop that. And now he is going to have a pretty big board. Because Conclave Mentor, it synergizes well with Galadriel's ability. So Galadriel says puts a counter on each creature, and then Conclave Mentor says it puts an additional counter. So he's going to make this 1/1. And so he'll make the 1/1, it'll come in, it'll put 2 counters on each creature, and then it'll give them trample as well. Because they're modified creatures. Yeah, he's a 5/5, a 3/3, a 4/4. Pretty strong guys. I think about pathing something. He attacks Tomag. Brings down to 16. Gets some lands into play. And we think about pathing. We don't. We should path here, though. We think about pathing a Scarab God, too, but we chose not to path anything. I made some poor decisions this game. I hope it doesn't cost me anything. We go ahead and play Gishath. We have enough mana for it. And, like, at this point in the game, we need something big. Like, we have all these big dinosaurs, but at the same time, they don't do anything unless we have the Gishath in play. And we don't want to kill our Death Touch opponent because they can just concede in response. And they can also just block and kill our things. So we decide, this is a good time to attack our Grim opponent and get some things out of it. So we swing in for lots of damage, and we get to trigger our Gishath, which is the whole point of the deck, right? You want to trigger your Gishath as many times as you can. And we have this Goring Ceratops in our hand. We're gonna try to win the game in the next turn cycle. Honestly, I think we can do that. Skip ahead. It's weird because we do get 2 big strong creatures, a Zakama and Awakening Sun's Avatar, but these are creatures that we would have rather just drawn and cast. Like, you would rather draw and cast a Zakama so you can untap your lands and then draw and cast Awakening Sun's Avatar. But I mean, they're 2 7/7s that we got in for free from Gishath. So I'm not really complaining. I just don't like that. I wish we had those in our hand instead. So we have a pretty big board. Our opponents are going to have to deal with a lot. This Zakama is very good against our Death Touch opponent, which is why they're going to kill it with Infectious Bite. So target creature you control deals damage equal to its power. So it doesn't fight it, it just deals damage. So he uses it as a removal spell for Zakama. Pretty strong, actually. I really like cards like this, especially if you're playing a Death Touch deck. And so he kills our Zakama, which would have been so good. And then he puts the Whisper Silk Cloak on the Finn and doesn't attack me, but instead our Galadriel opponent, putting him to 7 infect. Don't know why he did that. So he's gonna go up to 7 infect, which is pretty close to dead. And then Scarab God's gonna drain us all for 3. Nothing. I mean, like, not saying they don't matter, but I think we and this Galadriel opponent are clearly in the lead right now. Everyone wanted to just dunk on this Death Touch opponent, so he's not really in the game. And then the Scarab God opponent, the Grim opponent, really hasn't done much. He does get his Akama back from our graveyard as a 4/4, but he doesn't have the right color of mana to activate any of its abilities. So that was a weird choice. It does have Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, though. So that makes sense. And then he gets a Toxic Scorpion back, gives something Death Touch. And then our opponent does this thing with Recruit the Worthy, where they make tons of creatures that are going to be large, and then puts counters on all of them. Gets a Pier and a Toothy out as well. So Pier says... So Pier partners of Toothy, so whenever you play Pier, you can search your deck for a Toothy. And Toothy, whenever it dies, you get to draw cards for each counter on it. It's a pretty strong card. So, look at this. So he gets to put that many plus 2 counters on all of his things. All these triggers from Pier and Conclave Mentor. Pretty scary. They also all have Trample, too. That's not fun. So we go ahead and have him attack this Tau Maggot opponent. He's gonna kill this Death Touch opponent. It means at 7, in fact, he takes one more hit from him, he's dead. So it makes sense to kill him here. I wish I would kill him. I wish I was gonna be the one to kill him, but no. No. He goes ahead, destroys him. Sends some of his creatures out on the way. They all have Trample though. So this is something I don't like. Okay, so you block the creatures. He's gonna just block the creature. Now he's dead anyways, right? Okay, I understand conceding. You're dead anyways, right? You block the Death Touch. That's 18, 17, 16, 6, 12, 18. So you die, right? You block those two, and you die from the trample damage. Or you're at 1, right? Something like that. Okay? But by conceding there, even though he has Death Touch creatures, he could kill some of these tokens. But by conceding, he's just basically like, oh yeah, I'm not going to kill your tokens, right? So people can concede at instant speed, and they can do that to affect sort of what should happen in the game, especially in a multiplayer game. Now, if we were playing the way that I would want it to be played, he would block the creatures, then die, and those creatures would die. But no, this is going to become an issue in the next turn of the game, that people concede instant speed so that their opponents don't get certain abilities or certain things don't happen on the battlefield. And I don't really not a fan of that. But I mean, it's part of the game. You can concede instant speed. And then we're gonna go ahead and half this guy, giving him trample. I could have saved my opponent, but he just conceded too early. If he blocked the creatures, maybe I would have saved him, but no, he conceded like right there. So he passed this. You don't want to deal with the trampling, the huge trampling guys. And then we go ahead and play Goring Ceratops. So this says whenever it attacks other creatures you control, gain double strike. And we have this Otepec Huntmaster to give them haste. So we can try to kill our opponents this turn. So we give this guy haste, and we use Watley so that these guys cannot block, so that we can kill this Grim opponent. He's at 37 life. We can't kill this opponent. They have too many blockers. They have a 7/7 right here. But we're going to send some creatures his way, and send some creatures this way. I think we just attack with Gishath because it has double strike, and he doesn't really have any blockers for it. Gishath by itself will kill it. It'll deal 14 damage, and that's enough for commander damage. And then we have all these other creatures sending that way. I don't know if he's actually dead, but we're gonna send some creatures and multiple opponents' ways. Creatures get double strike, so we'll also get 2 triggers off of the Gishath as well. But like I said, this opponent playing the Grim doesn't want to play it out. He's probably dead. I don't actually know if he's for sure dead, but he doesn't take the combat damage. He decides to concede, right? Which, I mean, we kill one of our opponent. That's one of our opponents. That's great and all. But at the same time, this prevents us from getting in twice with our Gishath. Because Gishath would have dealt damage to him twice because it has trample and double strike. And we would have gotten to look at the top like 5 twice and gotten some big dinosaurs into play. So him conceding right there stops something that naturally would have happened from happening. And it's a little bit, I don't know, I'm not a fan of it. But, oh well. We go ahead and attack and force this Galadriel opponent to block some of our creatures. And then we play our Gishath post-combat because we need a blocker because he actually has some pretty strong creatures in play. He puts the Conclave Mentor to trade with one of our double striking guys, which is interesting. This is a 6/6 and a 4/4, by the way. We should have gotten that Sword Tooth earlier in the game, most likely. We deal some combat damage. We play Galta for 2 green mana. Yeah, green, 12/12. That's pretty strong, right? And then our opponent is going to grow his team again. That's a 6/6 and a 4/4. We only have 2 blockers. And I don't want to block the Gishath. He also plays Simic Ascendancy, so he has a way to win the game about combat. It's 24 counters on it. 24 counters on the Simic Ascendancy. 24 counters on the Simic Ascendancy, so he's going to kill me anyways. He attacked with some creatures, so we need to kill him on our turn. We block that way so that we can kill one of his 8/8 and so we don't die. But we have the win, right? He's at 37. We attack with the Goring Ceratops. And we just win, so we have to attack with everything, because if we don't attack with everything, then he wins with a Simic Ascendancy, so we need to attack with everything, give him all double strike, and, he can block, math is for blockers, right? But I'm pretty sure this way he's actually dead, but no, he plays Teferi's Protection, Fog, well played. Fog is an A-tier card in this format. Very good against dinosaurs, because now he gets to phase out, he gains protection from everything, he doesn't take any damage, and he can win at his upkeep with Simic Ascendancy, and of course he can just attack me with his creatures. We're at 11. Well played, opponent. So that is the game. We go ahead and scoop. Maybe we shouldn't have scooped. Maybe we should have let him dealt combat damage. But there's no way we win. He just wins on his upkeep with Simic Ascendancy, which is really cool. I didn't realize playing this they won with Simic Ascendancy, or else I would have just let him play. We say good games to our opponents, and we had a good time with this game. We did a lot of stuff, and we had a great time, I think. Talking about the Fin deck gets focused out pretty easily, so we go ahead and concede. We are dead in multiple ways. Fog, pretty good card. Fog is pretty sweet. We give it to our opponent who's playing Finn. We feel bad for him getting targeted. But yeah, I want to talk about some things sort of in that game. I think we made some poor decisions when we worldly tutored for Earthshaker Dreadmaw. We should have worldly tutored for the one that dealt 1 damage to each creature, so we can clear some of the creatures out of the way. Or we should have gotten an Itali, something better than Earthshaker Dreadmaw. So that was a mistake we did. But a few other mistakes, I think. Well, not mistakes. We should have targeted our Galadriel opponent before we killed our other opponent, because his creatures were a bit bigger, and I think we could have killed him, actually. So I don't know. But 2 things I want to talk about. One, people hate the Infect deck. People hate the Finn Death Touch deck. I don't hate it, and people want to hate it out. People want to attack you, and it's a really fun deck, interesting build, and I don't think needs to be as focused and targeted as much as it was in this game. And second thing is please, 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 please don't concede before things happen. So there's two times where, you know, an opponent could have blocked and then saved themselves by blocking 2 creatures, and they would have been at 1, I think, or maybe they still would have died. I think they would have been at 1, killed 2 creatures, and then had a chance to rebuild, but no, they just conceded. And then an opponent was dead to my Gishath, and then he just concedes instead of letting the Gishath hit him and getting the triggers on the Gishath, which is kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of upset about that. Like, you should you should let the things happen, right? So that you know, the things that otherwise would have happened naturally happen, because that cost me like 4 different creatures. It didn't actually cost me anything because I would have been dead anyways, but it was a decision that I do not support. Anyways, I hope you like this gameplay. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.